know what's hard today in pro wrestling? Being a heel. Trying to play bad guy in front of an audience who understands what the deal is behind the scenes makes it exceptionally hard, because at least some of them will just shrug their shoulders. They know how it works, and unless there's a true reason to boo someone, it's no longer enough to just send someone to the ring and tell everyone they're an asshole. One way to do this is when a wrestler is perceived to have received too much too soon, but that opens up a whole bag of worms like we saw with Roman Reigns. A better way is to take someone that's respected and get them to make a huge life change, because then you genuinely feel screwed over. The person you put on a pedestal spits in your face, sometimes literally. If someone can come across as likable and then pull the wool over your eyes, it's a lot more likely that the jeers will follow. And it gives you justification to plunge eye daggers into their heart. I'm Simon from WhatCulture, and this is 10 wrestlers we had to love before we could hate. Number 10, Sergeant Slaughter. Given the time he was around, there's no two ways about it. Sergeant Slaughter was a face. He loved apple pie, waved Old Glory wherever he could, and was your traditional American Army man. He was G.I. Joe brought to life, and he'd fight off all those foreign menaces in the mid-80s. He could do no wrong, until he absolutely did. The same people who loved Sarge wanted to burn him alive when he returned to the WWE in 1990 alongside Colonel Mustafa and General Adnan. Admitting to now being an Iraqi sympathizer in the middle of the Gulf War, it was a shocking 180 for Slaughter, who legit did leave fans heartbroken. Not only had he turned his back on them, it didn't make any sense as to why he'd become a traitor during such a sensitive time. Would have been bad anyway, but to know how far he'd fallen was the cliched icing on the cake. It was super distasteful, which didn't hurt when generating heat, but having our love thrown into the ground was an extra kick in the teeth. Thankfully, it was over pretty soon after it began. Not sure anybody could have stomached it going on for much longer. Number 9, Owen Hart. In 1993 and 1994, Owen Hart was just Bret's younger brother who smiled and wanted nothing more than to be like his older sibling. To do this, he convinced the Hitman to team with him to go after the tag titles, and when that didn't work, he kicked the leg out from under his leg. Don't have a go at me for that grammar, that's what he actually said. This all worked because Owen was booked so simply. He claimed that Bret was too selfish to tag him in against the Quebecers, and it opened his eyes to how in his shadow he was. He couldn't take it anymore, and it spawned one of the best feuds of the mid-90s. Their matches at WrestleMania 10 and SummerSlam were sublime. When we got to August 2, fans absolutely hated Owen and his whinging ways. He was a right prick, even more so when he won the King of the Ring, as he managed to annoy Bret's followers and the general audience. Owen didn't care though, and he even cost his bro the WWE title against Bob Backlund at Survivor Series. Much like Sergeant Slaughter, it was another heartbreaking situation, and I only repeated that word because it was a pun. I am hilarious and an idiot. Number 8, Bret Hart. This clearly inspired the whole family, however, as years later Bret decided he may be able to learn a thing from it. The Hitman had been booed when he first arrived on the WWE scene in the 80s as he teamed with Jim Neidhart, but that was just because we were told they were the bad guys. There's no proper hate there. That changed after Hart won everyone over with a terrific run throughout the 90s, where he kind of became the successor to one Hulk Hogan. During this, his matches gripped audiences the world over, and Bret was just so easy to love. He felt real and like he cared. So when he hit out at America, disowned that side of the pond and declared Canada to be superior, well, it touched a nerve. The Hitman would then go on to reform the Hart Foundation and become public enemy number 1 to the US fan base. It simply wouldn't have worked if Bret hadn't been the babyface he had been for so long, as that was the whole foundation for the turn. He felt like the crowd had turned on him, and good family values first, and he was sick of it. Still one of the most complex and well executed turns we've seen. It all started because Bret was your hero. And now he was a piece of, well, you know, lovely. Number 7, Batista. Your first memory of Batista, other than that weird friend of Reverend Devon, is likely when he was a heel in Evolution. He did rock in that role, but again, he was kinda just a bad guy because he was associated with some other buttholes. Big Dave didn't truly blow up until he found his feet as a babyface and had that awesome feud with Triple H. Everything from 2005 to 2009 was pretty damn good too, and underrated while we're here, and because of it, fans adored him. That's why when he turned his back on all this in late 2009 to destroy his longtime pal Rey Mysterio, nobody could believe it. Batista basically carved Rey's skull in while shouting he was going to rip his head off, and it was quite believable during the whole tirade. I'm sure at least one person thought he may actually follow through with it. He was super aggressive, and teaming with Vince McMahon put all of this on another level. It all played out like the former icon had lost control of his ego, and it worked perfectly as he'd been an apple in so many people's eyes. We'd yearned for Dave. Well, no, we didn't, but it was close. We wouldn't have cared as much as we did if it wasn't for the relationship between Dave and Ray that had been built up by the writers, and we needed the context to get pissed off with the future actor. It's why it's working now as well. He just comes back and he's beating up Ric Flair. What an asshole. And yet we'll all still cheer him when he eventually goes into the Hall of Fame. Number 6, John Cena. I stand by the fact that deep down most people loved John Cena, even if it was just because it was so damn fun to boo him. Go back to the height of all that madness and look at Cena's reactions and how often he would goad the crowd. It was fantastic. It gets even better when you go a step further because yes, Johnny Boy was a babyface sensation and everybody couldn't get enough of him. Between 2004 and 2006, there was nobody who the audience anticipated more than Cena, and when he arrived, there was genuine love in the building. This was our new guy, and we were going to back him all the way. Until that changed quicker than plans for Kofi Kingston this year. Fans soon got sick of him as they felt Vince McMahon was pushing him down their throats. The fact he never lost became a sticking point, and cheers turned to jeers as the general view on his act went from cool to dorky. Throw in that all this happened as WWE embraced a PG lifestyle, and Cena was basically Barney the dinosaur before all was said and done, and nobody was going to let him forget it. The hate wouldn't have been as fierce as it was if it wasn't for the love that had been there first. Cena had to fall, and fall he did. Number 5, Shawn Michaels. The response for the Rockers in the late 80s was huge. Propped up by a large female fan base that saw Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty as poster boys, it didn't hurt they could fly around the place and had badass double team moves. This is why when Michaels lived up to his future nickname and broke some hearts, it tore people to pieces. This effect Michaels had absolutely helped him in getting heat as a heel, because all of a sudden he was embracing what fans had been saying. He was the best thing around from this point on, and he was gonna let everybody know it. It's one thing having the audience tell you that, but when you yourself jump on the bandwagon, it's always gonna rub people the wrong way. Arrogance was the new name of the game as HBK looked fancifully upon himself in the mirror before matches, and before the year was out, he had successfully turned the crowd against him. This self-important jerk could go to hell as far as they were concerned, with those aforementioned posters now ripped off bedroom walls and thrown into the bin. What an asshole! Number 4, Chris Jericho. Everyone could sing along with Chris Jericho in the year 2000. He would constantly say things like "Raw is Jericho" or "Would you please shut the hell up?" And as you knew it was coming, you could join in. Throw in that he had an underdog quality plus was good in the ring, and he was easy to get behind. The evidence for this was when he beat Triple H for the world title on a random Monday night because everybody went nuts, even if it was overturned before the show was done. Throughout it all, however, he did have a subtle heel quality about him. No one really embraced that when he first came across from WCW, and he was the next guy on the good side in 2001, hanging out just below Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock. So when he finally did pull the trigger by going way overboard in terms of being obnoxious, including his first undisputed title win, it pissed everybody off. Jericho had taken it too far in most people's eyes, and the once fun catchphrases were now annoying. As far as most people were concerned, Y2J was an ass clown. There was also a vibe that he had become everything he used to stand against, and that helped too. We cheered Jericho for being different, and now he was just like everybody else. Number 3, Daniel Bryan. Daniel Bryan is a wrestling genius. In 2018, when he surprised everybody by returning to the ring, he couldn't have been more loved. Something that was more than obvious at WrestleMania that year. His story was as inspiring as it was unbelievable. Right now, though, Bryan gets booed even when somebody else mentions his name. That is brilliant. Nobody can stand Daniel's eco-friendly rants or shaking his head at those who don't follow his way of life, and the message he puts out there now is utterly different to the one 12 months ago. The fact in storyline he called Kofi Kingston a B-plus player recently is just more evidence that he's become the thing he used to hate, and therefore generates more disdain from the audience. This character is way above any bad guy run that he's had in the past, and the amount of small touches takes it to the next level. Let's not forget too, that while Bryan isn't this guy, he does believe in living his life this way in reality, which just helps him get this across as legit. There is no way this wouldn't have been as effective if it wasn't the former yes man at the helm. All the memories that come with that help to remind you what he once was, and now what he is. All of it has been exquisite. Number 2, Andre the Giant. There was one thing that separated Andre the Giant from nearly every other monster heel Hulk Hogan worked with during his pomp. It wasn't that Andre was massive or that he was so respected beforehand, it was because the Giant had always been pitched as a happy, lovable big man who had carved a reputation for himself over a decade that everybody admired. It felt like you could go to dinner with Andre and walk away feeling like everything was going to be okay. Fans got so used to seeing him smile they forgot who they were looking at. A mammoth human who could crush your face with his hand should he so wish. He had universal love from everyone. So when he turned his back on that and tried to kill the Hulkster, someone who also had these feelings bestowed upon them, it was like your worst nightmare. All of a sudden it was clear somebody needed to stop Andre, and that's why all this worked as it did. The second part of Andre's stage name became very apparent very quickly, and any positivity that was there died. If Hulk hadn't have slain him at WrestleMania 3, who knows what he would have done. That he was booked to do, I guess, but still, this was very bad, and it soon became very apparent what had gone down. Number 1, Hulk Hogan. Following on from that too was Hogan himself. Throughout the 80s, no one could have even conceived of hating the Hulkster. He was everything you wanted from a babyface during that time, and the feel-good messages he put out there were inspiring for kids and made for happy parents. Hogan was the role model everybody needed. That line of thinking started to change in the 90s, and boos slowly got through the cracks whenever Hulk would arrive on the scene because it was believed he had become passé. A relic of olden times that wouldn't evolve. That's why when Eric Bischoff suggested he turn heel in WCW, it changed the very face of pro wrestling. The NWO and Hollywood were born. While most fans were bored of the red, white and yellow act by 1996, the thought of the Hulkster turning heel still sounded so ridiculous, and that's why no one thought they'd actually see it play out. When they did, it caused such a reaction they pelted the ring with garbage, because what else was there to do? There was a kind of meta appreciation for all this too, because those who'd been wanting Hulk to do something different felt justified. The least they could do was go along with it, and boy howdy did they. Hogan was the most hated heel in all of the industry, and it probably cemented his legacy as a legend. Know of any other wrestlers we had to love before we could hate? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Then head over to WhatCulture.com and read yourself some articles, and follow WhatCulture on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE. My name is Simon from WhatCulture. Thank you very much for watching, and let me tell you this, I will never hate you, it's always love.